RRF Caserta, South Italy. News in English.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking on a supremely complex and highly volatile region, the Middle East.
Absolutely.
Our mission is, as always, to give you the shortcut to being well-informed. We're parsing developments from a really tight window, late November into early December 2025.
Right.
And we're pulling threads from a lot of different international reports to hopefully give you a clear, grounded picture of what's going on both strategically and, well, on a human level.
And this is a deep dive into an active, multi-front war. And what the sources really show is this fascinating, if pretty depressing, intersection of crises.
It's not just one thing.
Not at all. We're not just looking at military conflict. We're tracking this deep political and social strain that's, threatening to destabilize the whole region.
So what are the big themes we're seeing?
I'd say there are three major themes playing out at the same time. First, you have this intense, high-stakes political maneuvering, all centered on Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Right, his domestic survival versus his regional plans.
Exactly. Then second, there's the grim, grinding reality of the hostage exchanges and, of course, the staggering humanitarian toll in Gaza.
And the third?
And finally, a really critical flashpoint has developed around settler violence in the West Bank. The international reaction to that has been pretty sharp.
It's just an enormous amount of geopolitical pressure cooker in just a few days. It really shows the region is, it's nowhere near settling into any kind of new normal.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the top with the political figures.
Yeah, let's. Because the domestic situation for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is, well, it's completely tangled up with the ongoing conflict. He is, as we know, under trial for corruption.
And during this specific period, he made a pretty staggering political move.
He really did. It just instantly dominated the conversation.
He didn't just, appeal his case in court. He formally asked President Herzog for a presidential pardon, or grace. That was reported around November 30th, December 1st.
A pardon.
And, that's a move that just seems to leverage the crisis for his own personal gain. Well, that's the crux of the analysis, right? He sent the request to Herzog, and he maintained his innocence, of course, but he framed the pardon as being necessary for reconciliation.
And for the good of Israel.
And crucially, yes, to serve the good of Israel. It's basically a way of saying, my personal legal problems are now getting in the way of national unity.
Right, and effective wartime governance.
Exactly. And whether you believe that framing or not, it forces the president into this corner where he has to weigh the country's need for stability against, the integrity of the whole judicial system.
So what was Herzog's immediate reaction to this? Because trying to insulate that decision from all the political heat must be almost impossible.
Oh, he had to tread so carefully. He confirmed right away that he would examine the request with responsibility.
And he said he'd seek opinions.
He said he'd seek opinions because of its important implications.
So he's buying time, essentially.
Buying time and trying to project impartiality. The sources note that the very next day, he made a public statement to try and insulate the decision, saying he would only consider the good of Israel.
And that he wouldn't be affected by the debate.
Right. Or what he called the violent discourse. That phrase alone, violent discourse, it just tells you everything you need to know about the political temperature inside Israel right now.
Okay, so while Netanyahu is fighting this battle for his political life at home, he's also making these very visible moves across the region.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a classic strategy, right? Project strength and focus externally when the domestic front is at its weakest.
It's a fascinating dual approach. On December 3rd, reports came out that Netanyahu had sent a representative to Lebanon.
To Lebanon?
Yes, in what was described as a first attempt to lay the groundwork for a political and economic relationship. It's a signal, maybe, that they're trying to decouple economic potential from the immediate security crisis.
But hold on, how can you credibly talk about a long-term economic relationship with Lebanon when the military tension with Hezbollah is? It's at an absolute peak.
That's the question.
Is this genuine outreach, or is it more like a security demand dressed up in diplomatic language?
I think it's mostly security posturing, but with an eye on the future. You're right to question the timing. It comes right alongside these explicit military threats.
Like what?
Well, back on November 26th, we saw that severe warning from Foreign Minister Katz. He said Hezbollah must disarm within the year or face military intervention.
So sending an economic rep is sort of the carrot to that very big stick.
It could be. a way of offering the Lebanese state something, while at the same time threatening the non-state actor, Hezbollah.
Okay, and then shifting east, the Syria question also came up during this time.
Absolutely. Another layer of complexity. Netanyahu stated that an agreement with Syria could happen, but, and this is a big but, only if security is maintained.
And what's the context there?
Well, the context is external pressure. This statement came just a day after a warning from former President Trump, who cautioned Israel not to damage Damascus.
Wow, okay. That's a critical piece of the puzzle. What does that kind of external warning do? Does it imply some friction or a red line the U.S. is drawing?
It definitely signals a limit on their maneuverability. For Israel to immediately follow a warning like that by issuing a conditional statement, it suggests they're acknowledging that constraint.
They're communicating to their own people and to Damascus.
I think so. They're saying their strategic goals in Syria are now tied much more closely to international, maybe specifically U.S., tolerance. It really shows how Israel's regional strategy is constantly being adjusted by these external global powers.
And we've talked about the threats, but let's bring it back to the immediate kinetic conflict. The Lebanon-Hezbollah front. We have hard evidence of recent conflict, not just words.
That's right. Just before this period, on November 24th, sources reported the funeral of Haytham Ali Tabatabai,
A senior Hezbollah military official.
a very senior official, killed by an Israeli airstrike. And the fact that Iran publicly condemned that killing on November 23rd just underscores how regional this conflict is. These targeted strikes carry enormous risks of escalation.
And there's this deep religious and political dimension to it all. I think that plea from a Shiite leader in Lebanon to the Pope, it really captures the counter-narrative perfectly.
It does. This leader said publicly that they were, and I'm quoting here, attacked by Israel and forced to defend ourselves, do not love weapons.
You contrast that with the Israeli demand for unconditional disarmament.
And it perfectly illustrates these two irreconcilable narratives driving the whole conflict. One side sees itself as responding to existential aggression, and the other sees its opponent as an illegally armed, Iran-backed proxy that has to be dismantled.
And both are claiming self-defense.
Exactly.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture of the strategic chessboard. Let's move now to the core conflict on the ground, the exchanges, the casualties, the humanitarian crisis that just overshadows everything.
Yeah, and this part of the story is, it's just defined by constant setbacks. We saw a particularly brutal one in the hostage exchange process during this period.
That report on December 3rd, it was just devastating. It confirmed that the remains delivered by Hamas the day before, they were not those of an Israeli hostage.
It's just a profound political and emotional blow. I mean, Israel had received the body of another hostage earlier on November 25th, and what they thought were the remains of the penultimate hostage on December 2nd.
But then this failure on December 3rd.
It just underscores that Hamas is still able to control and, frankly, manipulate the timing and fulfillment of these exchanges. It means they still need to return the remains or bodies of 2 more people to satisfy the agreements.
And the whole process just remains so agonizingly uncertain.
Completely fragmented.
And while all of this excruciating maneuvering is happening, the humanitarian crisis is just crushing. We have to talk about the hard numbers. Was there any movement on aid at all? Any sliver of hope?
A very small one. A bit of operational relief. Israel did reopen crossings with Egypt and the Gaza Strip on November 30th.
So an Egyptian aid convoy got in?
It did. But this is where the sheer scale of the crisis just hits you. The statistics from our sources they're truly alarming.
Give us the figures. What summarizes the scale of this disaster?
By November 29th, the total casualties in Gaza had surpassed 70,000 victims.
70,000.
And when you hear a number that big, it's easy to lose the human focus. But then you get the subsequent figures, and they bring it sharply back.
Like the UNICEF estimate.
Exactly. UNICEF estimates that over 9,000 children are at risk of acute malnutrition in the Gaza Strip.
9,000 children just facing acute malnutrition. That number specifically, it just highlights a systemic failure that goes way beyond the immediate violence.
It does. What does reopening one crossing really achieve when you're facing needs on that magnitude?
It means the entire aid delivery system is fundamentally broken.
It's insufficient. The figure of 9,000, that's not just a high number. It suggests a total breakdown of the food supply, clean water, medical access. It could lead to mortality spikes even if the fighting just stopped tomorrow.
So the limited reopening of crossings is necessary, but it's just a drop in the ocean.
It's a marginal step. It really speaks to this ticking public health clock that's running completely independent of military action.
And alongside these huge casualty counts, The specific daily security incidents, they just keep happening. It's a relentless grind of violence.
It is. And we see reports that highlight these individual tragedies, which often capture global attention much more sharply than the big numbers.
Right.
For instance, media reports detailed the killing of 2 siblings, a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, by an Israeli drone strike in Khan Yunis on November 29th.
That specific detail, the ages, the location, it makes the tragedy so concrete.
It does. And the conflict extends beyond Gaza, too. In the West Bank, there was an incident reported on December 3rd. A Palestinian was killed in Hebron after allegedly launching a car attack against Israeli soldiers and then trying to escape.
This high-pressure conflict is playing out across all the territories.
And that's a really important transition to the West Bank, because that area became a major international flashpoint during this period.
Particularly because of the rise in settler aggression.
Yes, specifically against international aid workers and activists.
This issue of settler violence has really crossed a threshold now, hasn't it? It's not just a localized security problem anymore. It's a full-blown diplomatic crisis.
Absolutely.
Let's detail that attack on the Italian activists. It was so targeted.
It happened near Jericho around November 30th. 3 Italian activists, or volunteers, were staying in the area. They were attacked in a brutal overnight raid.
The sources describe a really aggressive assault.
They do. About 10 settlers used kicks and punches. They weren't just chased away, they were explicitly told not to come back.
And what's so interesting is the motive that the victim cited. They linked the violence directly to international politics.
Yeah, the Italian volunteers specifically noted that settlers were, quote, more angry because we were Italian.
And they linked that to Italy's perceived support for the Palestinian cause.
Which is critical. It shows the violence isn't just random or opportunistic. It can be politically motivated. It can be targeted based on an aid worker's nationality and their country's diplomatic stance.
And despite the assault, the volunteers vowed to return.
They did, which really highlights the determination of these organizations.
That move forced an immediate, very public diplomatic response from Rome. How did Italy and the broader European community react?
The response was swift, and it was coordinated. Italian Foreign Minister Tajani publicly called on the Israeli government to step in and stop this violence. But more importantly, this wasn't just an isolated complaint from Italy.
Right, it followed that joint condemnation.
A few days earlier, November 27th, you had a joint condemnation issued by a really powerful bloc: Italy, France, Germany, and Great Britain.
So why is that joint condemnation from what some call the E44 of Europe's major powers? Why is that so significant right now?
Because it turns a bilateral complaint into a coordinated strategic statement. These 4 countries are key security and trading partners for Israel. When they jointly condemn internal violence, it exerts so much more pressure than just individual statements. It forces the Israeli government to recognize that its actions in the West Bank are creating a real diplomatic liability with its most important European allies.
It's a clear signal, then. The status quo on settler aggression is just not tolerable anymore.
Not to these key global partners, no.
So, to summarize the whole picture for you, our listener, these sources from late November and early December, they shed a region that's grappling with conflicts on so many interconnected planes.
So many.
You've got a profound judicial crisis at the top with Netanyahu's pardon request, which is competing with these critical border negotiations about Syria and Lebanon.
And at the same time, you have the devastating unresolved humanitarian crises in Gaza.
And this increasing social violence in the West Bank that's drawing sharp, coordinated international attention.
And if we connect this all back to where we started, to the political analysis, what's so fascinating is just how relentlessly domestic legitimacy and external security policy are intertwined. It raises this important question that you really have to weigh when you're reading these sources. When is a political leader's main motivation focused on personal survival, and when is it truly focused on national security?
Especially when, as these sources suggest, those two goals seem to be constantly competing with each other.
And sometimes even reinforcing each other.
It's the central paradox of this whole period. And as you process all this information, think about how the increasing documentation of these specific granular incidents, the confirmed targeting of international aid workers, the specific deaths of 2 kids in Khan Yunis, the failure of one specific remains return, how that shifts the global conversation.
Yeah, what's the impact of that detail?
Does that detail exert a more immediate political cost than just getting generalized casualty numbers? What unique impact does that level of detail have on diplomacy and international pressure? We'd encourage you to keep exploring those connections.
RRF Caserta, South Italy. News in English.